done, Katie. Thanks for doing that, because we're getting some questions on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go with the SAQ. This is the homework. And this was just a data set that I put together. And when I was looking at this, I was thinking, okay, so they have 20 minutes per SAQ. If it were me, I would put together a data set that's a little more extensive. So, and what that does is you have to read it, but it also gives you lots of different ways to answer it. So here is the questions that was yesterday's homework. It is we have this number of labor strikes in selected European countries. The dates are important, 1914 to 1921. So we know 1914 to 1918 is World War I, and then these are just a few years after World War I. Task A is to describe a significant trend shown in the data. Task B is explain one political development that contributed to a trend in the data. And task C is explain one economic effect that resulted from a trend in the data. So there is a difference between describe and explain. Some of you were asking that in the feedback, and I'm going to go through that next. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a sample of task A. There you see the task, describe a significant trend shown in the data. And so I think if you build the slide, Katie, we're going to see describe be circled here. There's a difference between describe and explain. So describe just means to tell me about, and it's a lower threshold. You don't have to explain where you go how or why or because. So we're seeing a response here from Zoe from Shadow Mountain High School in Phoenix, Arizona. They are the Matadors. And in the blue, we've been encouraging you to use the T structure, which is topic, sentence, evidence, and analysis. And so in the blue, you see the topic sentence. A significant trend shown in the data is a significant increase in the amount of labor strikes following World War I. Well, that is true. That did happen. And that's a little bit of evidence as well that's packed into that one sentence. And because we're just doing describe, the analysis does not have to be that extensive. So here it is. As the war ended, economies were ruined, and it was difficult for many people to get their jobs back. So we're telling you, describing the trend. It was increased because strikes increased after World War I. That's the trend. And this is why it happened. Very brief, but it's going to earn the point for task A. So good job, Zoe, Shadow Mountain High School. Task B. This is an explain task. If you explain, you're not only going to tell me what happened, but how or why or because. So there's a higher threshold with an explain task. So this is explain one political development that contributed to a trend in the data. This is from Guillermo from Birmingham Community Charter High School in Van Nuys, California. They are the home of the Patriots. So again, we see the T structure, and in the blue, we have our topic sentence. And I like what Guillermo has done here because we're using the stem of the prompt to respond to the prompt. One political development that contributed to Russia. Guillermo is focusing in on Russia of the data table. Russia's trend to having a high amount of labor strikes during World War I and no data after 19 is explained by Russia's shift from a monarchy to a communist society and dictatorship. Yep, absolutely. In 1917, the Russian Revolution occurred in Russia, which caused the Russians to drop out of the war since the Civil War was more important to them, which explains why there were so many strikes even during the war, as the people of Russia believed their country needed change and viewed that more important than war. That is the evidence that we've seen in the data and is coming out of Guillermo's head. And now we're getting analysis. The people were against Tsar Nicholas II, who was unsuccessful and caused Russia to experience poor economic conditions, which eventually led to the Bolshevik Revolution. Vladimir Lenin hoped to create a communist society supported by the people of Russia, eventually leading them to take over the monarchy. And this explains why strikes did not happen after 1917. The people were happy with this new government. And that would be enough. But then he continues here. This evidence connects back to the claim because it shows the political development of the Russian Revolution, explains why Russia experienced labor strikes during World War I and why the revolution strikes ended. And I think I just built in there, I like what you did there with that. Yeah, I like what you did there. It wasn't needed, but I like when a student is saying it's connecting back to my claim because, I mean, that's really hammering home on the analysis. Okay. And then task C, this is from Grace at North Andover High School, North Andover, Massachusetts. They are the Scarlet Knights. And again, we have an explain task. And this one, there were several responses here where I was like, okay, I'm not sure. And I'm going to get to that because a lot of you wanted to talk about the Great Depression. So remember, the data in the table is till 1921. And the Great Depression, as we know it, doesn't occur until the end of the 20s, 1929, and it really hits Europe 1929, 1930.
Right.
So because this sentence is structured around trend in the data, we really need to stick with that. So it begins. The labor strike that preceded the First World War plunged the European economy into greater debt. So we did see the labor strikes in that first year. Remember, the war starts in August, so we're 7 months into the year before the war actually begins. And so you did see quite a few labor strikes early. After World War I, most European countries were in debt to one another. Germany had owed extreme reparations to the Allied powers, who in turn owed money to the US. On top of this crumbling economy, the stock market crash only made things worse. So the stock market crash, again, it's in this, but it's really not significant to the data, but it's not going to mess up Grace's response. The only European countries could return to their pre-war economies was to boost production, build back up their economic infrastructure. This was made almost impossible by these labor strikes. There we go. We're back into what the data is about, the labor strikes. As people refused to work and stalled the already crippled economy. Therefore, the effect of post-World War I labor strikes was a further damaged economy. There we go, Grace, that's really well done. We've got the T analysis, and even though we're kind of mentioning you, a lot of you want to go there, and I can see where you want to go there, but we're sticking within the structure of the question. Make sure that we're answering the question. Okay, great job.
No, I think that was great. And I think reminding students to really be mindful of the time periods of the questions is a good reminder, because when you get off topic, it's not your evidence, it's not going to count because it's not going to be relevant. So